Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome once again to Record Breakers, a music podcast where a group of friends gather together to talk about music, share albums with each other, an album at a time, taking turns. It's like a little book club for music. It's a fun experience, fun time had by all. Come along with us, don't you? I'm Petey Rave, and I only chase real rabbits. Here with me is my team, my squad, my crew. We've got David.
Pedialyte, rebranded for adults with hangovers.
Mm-hmm. We've got Drew.
Silly rabbit, tricks are for kids.
Yes. And
you know
of course,
what? I always had a real serious problem with those commercials. Well, that's. I won't get into it.
No.
But it's
Get on the
injustice.
soapbox.
Yes.
No.
And of course, once again, we have Bryce.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, we're here. Talk about music. Talk about an album.
Can't get political with a guest, you guys.
Yes. We're talking about an album. Instead of getting on your soapbox about Trix cereal, let's get on a soapbox about this album. The provider of the album this week is David. David, Deej, what album have you brought for us this week?
PD Rave Record Breakers listeners and fans, I've decided to take a jump over into the world of Vaporwave and future funk again. And I have brought an album by Portland, Oregon-based artist Vektroid and her 2016 album Seed and Synthetic Earth. There's a lot of S sounds in there. And thanks to a particular YouTuber that I'm a big fan of, shout out Magdalene Rose, Vaporwave has been in my periphery recently, and This is the album we're bringing.
Yes. This is not our first foray into this style, but I'm looking forward to this. And yes, this does sound like, we'll get into it, but this does sound like it could exist in the year 2016. Drew. Let's talk about expectations. Drew, what were your expectations coming into this album?
So Vektroid is a name that I've seen around. It's something that I sort of had an idea going in. I was like, oh, okay. Like, I've seen this name around the, like, wavy, hypnagogic sort of stuff that I've been into, in one way, shape, or form for a while, just listening to like random playlists and stuff on YouTube. And it's something that like I really dig this style of music, but like very rarely does something grab me in a way that I'm like listening to a full album of like something like some chillwave album or some like vaporwave thing or anything like that. It's usually like on those sorts of playlists and those radios with GIFs on YouTube and all that jazz. So it's something that I'm always excited to get into like a full one of these and like, okay, what is the artist thinking all the way? And it's usually like one of the staples, like a blank Banshee or something like that I usually dive into. So I was really excited to get into this one. So,
Bryce, what were your expectations coming into this album?
I did not know the Vektroid name before listening to it, and it was only after listening to it that I found her extensive pedigree, especially in the vaporwave space. I went in with very little expectations at all. I didn't even know. I had none, I guess.
Yeah. I didn't quite know what to expect. I actually expected, for some reason, even looking at the album cover, I expected it to be some kind of like crazy metal album. But I think that's just my prejudice towards what DJM usually picks. But I wasn't quite sure what to expect coming into this, and this is an interesting album musically. David, how would you describe this album musically? What would be the themes and elements that you would point out?
I feel like with a lot of vaporwave, there is a lot of instrumental that tries to bring forth a feeling of malaise. whether it is about society. As it says in the article, it is an expose of late capitalism, as Macintosh plus the other Vektroid project is once described. An expose of late capitalism, so that there is a malaise instead of less of a fervor or an energy all throughout this album, and a lot of her work that I think sets a mood that I enjoy. And I think that this album in particular does that with some more electronic elements that are a little more up tempo, to the point where it's future funk. But I really feel that overall haze and malaise about the world in this album.
Mm-hmm. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, the cool thing about like the vaporwave sort of thing is that quote unquote that hypnagogic feeling. The looking through, what was the saying? Looking through a memory, thinking of like the past in like a very weird way and sort of pulling you through it. Vaporwave, especially like your Macintosh pluses, your floral shops and whatnot, it is very much this take on nostalgia through a nihilistic view. That's sort of what Vaporwave lives in. But usually it does it in a much more decidedly melancholy way. Whereas those albums, to me, a lot of them feel like, hey, like the world kind of sucks and everything like here is like everything that we remember is cool is sort of sad to look back on. That commercialism sort of takes over what your memories have become and puts it in this very sad light. This album to me didn't, if everything in there is nihilistic and we should all die because it's all sad, this one is decidedly more, you know what, like the late capitalism and the nostalgia filled weirdness that we live in sucks, so we're going to party anyways. Like there was dance music in this at times, which a lot of times in Vaporwave you don't get. You got that sense of, instead of being morose and sad about it, it's like, okay, we're just going to party because it's the end of the world anyways. Like, might as well. Like, what else are we going to do? Like, it's all ending.
That is the
us.
basis of a lot of the conversations my sister and I have nowadays.
Yes. And it's like, okay, well, fine. If we're going to see a paradigm shift and everything's going to, like, suck, we might as well party while it's doing it. There's a cool swankiness to everything that's here, which is a fun word to say. Unlike hypnagogic, which is a hard word to say. And that's the thing is, like, yeah, there's a certain lens of sadness that everything is through a little bit, but at the same time, it's like, there's a rap feature, which is something that, like, I wish more Vaporwave and more Retrowave and more of this style of, like, electronic weird retroness would go into, was like, nah, get, like, don't get all the SoundCloud rappers, because most of them aren't that good. But get some of them, because there's some gold in them, their hills, and, like, bring them in and, like, do stuff with them, because it's cool. But we'll get into that, I guess, a little later.
Yep. Bryce, how would you describe this album musically?
You know, it wasn't until after I had heard the album and looked up more information on it that I got the Macintosh Plus connection. Because honestly, Vaporwave would not be the first word that would come to mind to describe it. I mean, there are certain elements of it that are Vaporwavy, especially if you like are trying to find it in there. But this actually reminded me a lot more of the sort of maximalist electronic music of like if you know Igloo Ghost, I would have believed it if you told me that this was an Igloo Ghost pseudonym or something he produced or something, rather than from the same woman who did Floral Shop. And I love it. The idea of like just these tracks never stop, and they're always different and evolving, and that there's no structure. Like I think it feels almost the opposite of Vaporwave. I guess if we are keeping that like as a guiding light of like, Vaporwave is very repetitive and very structural and feels very like tied to a relic almost, with a lot of the use of sampling, where this feels like the opposite, right? Like so many of these tracks just have fade outs on them, which just gives you the feeling that they're going to continue endlessly. And when you have these songs that are short on structure, that are just like constant changes, constant different sounds and feelings and moods, it feels restless and in some places like cinematic, right? Like they sound aesthetically like a classic video game in a lot of cases. I just finished playing Hypnospace Outlaw, which is like,
oh man,
90s.
I'm in the middle of that. We need to talk.
Yeah, we will. But it aesthetically feels it's very similar, which is like faux MIDI, like a very electronic digital sounds, in a kind of corny, sense, but in lieu of like soundtracks, where soundtracks often have to be very regimented, have to be very structural, have to be something that you can listen to it on loop forever and be okay with, kind of in a similar vein as Vaporwave in some cases. This felt cinematic because it was constantly feeling bespoke. It felt like every measure and every phrase was handcrafted and felt like something new is happening. Something new is happening, so the music is new constantly. So that's kind of how I would describe it. Is very maximalist in that sense.
Yeah, I think you guys pretty much summed it all up. I think the only thing I would add is just it was fun. Like I would like, it was just outright fun. I think for all the reasons you guys described. I will say it's definitely reminds me of Genesis music. Like it makes me think of, I don't know, specifically the Sega Genesis, and I don't know why.
I thought you were saying like Phil Collins, Tony Banks Genesis.
Sure, them too, but mostly the Sega Genesis.
Though I love them too, and I am the Sonic fan, so that works on all levels.
And that was, like I said, like I literally said in my notes of what Genesis, just scribbling Genesis music, which is perfect for DJM. And also Jeff Gerstmann and Ghostly approved, which is like a great, approved. Their Vektroid is followed by both Jeff Gerstmann and the Ghostly label, which is, I think, a nice like pairing for a band. I think it works well. Let's talk about some key tracks. David, what would be some of the key tracks to zero in on for you?
I got really pretentious on writing my moods when I was listening to the tracks on these. Don't Chase Fake Rabbits. I wrote down describing it as, it put me in a vibe that wants to get on a treadmill in the middle of a night in an empty gym. And I liked it. There was something dark, but not desolate and sad. Blood from a Stone. It got in a weird place. It started there, and then it went into this weird amalgamation of 80s synth pop and almost a atmospheric Steve Vai guitar solo, and I just loved it. It was very reminiscent of My Hero Gem Godfrey in a lot of ways, and I really dug that one a lot. Mobius Blue, the final track on the album, had a groove buried deep down in the track that I just kind of wanted to stay in because I absolutely loved it. Just all over this album, it had moment after moment after moment that was unexpected, but just I loved staying in those moments as much as I could.
Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
So We Need to Talk. The bass in that, I think, really is sort of, if I were to pick out the part where I think like, oh hey, this is probably where PD's getting the Genesis vibe from, I think like We Need to Talk, like the bass in that specifically, like the Genesis had this very specific bass tone to it that I think is really great and needs like a lot of chiptune artists gravitate towards the NES and the Game Boy and the Super Nintendo because like that's a lot of the nostalgia. I think the sound chip, especially like the bass tones that you got out of that Yamaha chip and the Genesis, there's something special there that I think needs to be more.
You can really hear it in the first two Mortal Kombat games.
Yeah. And I think
shout out to Bone Thugs and Harmony for sampling for years ago sampling Eternal Champions.
Hey, Cleveland knows how to do things sometimes. Every once in a while. Shout out to Johnny Gargano. But no, I think We Need to Talk hits that bass tone. That's really, really cool. It's like this like weird sine waveness to it that's really, really neat. Hard Toys. As I said, the SoundCloud rapper shows up. And for some reason, like this sort of music, right? The like weird sort of nostalgic look back, whether it be your vaporwaves or your retrowaves or whatever, like they're getting a groundswell, right? And I think the thing that could like make it go from like these guys are struggling to like they're getting cult status and have a lot of like growth potential is adding lyrics here and there and like spreading out into those other worlds. And I think Sadiq, if I'm pronouncing that right, he doesn't overstay his welcome. The vocals that are provided from him, I think, add something to the track. They do not take away, which is important when you're adding vocals to what is normally electronic music, which can be very touchy. But it does well here. And I think that crossover works really well. And then ending with Mobius Blue, the Kmart sax in this, like that specific Kmart sax tone, and as soon as I say Kmart, that synthetic, like overly like bright sax tone that you got in like a Kmart Muzak like tape was all up in this song, and I could not love it more. Like it was such a mic drop moment for me. I was like, yeah, this is cool. Like this is all right.
Yes. Bryce, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
We Need to Talk is especially strong, partially because of where it is on the album. Like that being the first song, and it being 6 minutes long. I started listening to that, and that's really where I started feeling the Igloo Ghost vibes, because it just like kept going and kept changing, where I kept thought, okay, well, this is different enough from where it started that this might just be another song, and this might all just be like one long thing. And I kept checking, and it kept being the same song. So I think that's a very striking tone for the album. It really sets you up for kind of what you're expecting. Hostage Earth and Good Head Perfect Sun are really good tracks in feeling like soundtrack songs a little bit, but with none of the repetition. But I think those are really good. I think they have a very strong imagery in a way that is a modern idea. I mean, a lot of this has a very retro sound, but the images that you pull out of the aesthetic of those two songs is a very modern idea. Like, I think if you had these songs in the 80s, you would go, okay, those are kind of, yeah, you're doing stuff. But like that we have all these different references to, soundtracks and video games and stuff, that these can create really strong images is a very modern idea, to pull it out of these songs. Also, Seed and Synthetic Divide, the title, kind of title track, is really great. I believe that's the one that has just like a ton of really cool uses of rhythm. I think that's the one that is not always in 4/4. If I'm right, does that sound right?
At least that one, and I was going to mention also God.
DJM shaking his head. Yeah, and I love that because you constantly feel like you're like a wheel is turning, like you're just about to get into the next thing, and I love when producers can really take that idea of feeling like it's skipping on the beat without feeling too off-putting. There's a big Perfume song from last year or the year before called "If You Wanna," and it has this big future bass sound to it, and the chorus is this big future bass synth, and it drops the beat for like 3.5 beats, and it comes back, and it feels like the most impossible song to remember because you can't get that. The timing doesn't feel right on it. Where here it feels not natural, but it does feel something you can get familiar with. So I think like a really lot of good stuff. I didn't love the Sadiq feature, but I see it.
Yeah. I think you guys had a pretty solid tracks. Yeah, it definitely starts off solid with the "We need to talk." It establishes the vibe right away, in a really weird way. Yeah, I think I have it noted under Godhead, Perfect Sun, where I talk about the odd rhythm play, but it could be that they both have some of that.
Maybe that is it.
Might be. But yeah, and the way that like the playing with the rhythm and the playing with all that is really fun, and like how it's really captivating in a way. And then Hostage Earth is another one where like it sounds sort of Genesis-y, or like especially like right at the beginning, it sounds like it sounds like outright video game music, and then it just kind of pulls the rug out from under you, and then just kind of goes into something else vibe wise entirely. It's a really, really cool thing. Let's bring it back around the horn, talk about some conclusive thoughts. Drew, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
This album is one of those things that it's at the same time both really hard to recommend like to most people, but really easy to recommend
to the right people.
To the right people. Like if somebody like came up to me and said, "Yeah, like I like the feeling and the emotion that you get from like the Macintosh Pluses of the world or a Blank Banshee or something like that, but I want something that's a little more upbeat." Like this is almost tailor-made for that person. Like they want something faster, but they want to necessarily feel the same emotion, right? And I think that's really cool. It's something that like Vaporwave, or this style, right? The Vaporwave, the dance electronica stuff that this sort of lives in, is something that like usually it's something I go for when like I'm just sort of chilling in my room with headphones on and stuff like that. This album is one that I could throw on in the car, and that's not usually something you get out of this style, which I really like. It's something that I think this person's music in general, finding out the connections to like Floral Shop and stuff like that, people should at least listen to this once just to understand where they're coming from, because it's using the way that this sort of plays. Ramona Andrea Xavier sort of plays as an artist within this form, I think is really interesting and really cool. So for people who get like the quote unquote art side of music, this is really easy to suggest to. to somebody like, say, a Mr. Hibbard, who maybe comes to it more for the pure musicianship side of things, and not necessarily always the like weird avant-garde art side of things. Little bit harder of a sell. But like knowing your audience and that, like if you come to it and you like the avant-garde and you like the weird, and you like it because it's sort of on that weird side, this is a really good one to go to. It's really cool.
Yeah. I think, yeah, definitely. Bryce, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album as a whole?
I think as an album, it's very consistent and it feels very cohesive. I think it is probably something where I would feel okay putting it on either on shuffle or kind of on as a whole, but I don't know that there are too many songs that I would pull out and put in my like shuffled playlist. But I think it's incredibly solid, and it really rides the line with being very bespoke and feeling like it's constantly shifting, but also doing the dance that sort of instrumental electronic music has to do, which is like kind of fades into the background. And so I think on either day, this album has something for you in there. It definitely is not for everyone. It's definitely like not a sound a lot of people are going to love. There's not too much that you would like want to dance to, right? But I think this is a really cool sort of world in the album, and I really like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it just it's a cool experience. It's a cool thing to kind of get lost in musically. Like it's kind of cool, just kind of like a wash over you quite a bit, and kind of let the malaise wash over you in a sense. But the musically, it just kind of is really fun to just kind of vibe with, and a lot of it just works and like in really fun experimental ways and really fun like structure play ways, and yeah, music is just really cool. David, last but not least, what would be your conclusion on this as a whole?
What this was for me was exactly as Drew described. I am the person that likes the blank Banshees of the world, but does like something with a little bit more energy. Whereas Brett has his sprawling. PD Rave once said that for me, shit has to slap. And for me, at a lot of points, this does. And it is that vibe, but it is something that I can drive to. And this is an album of electronic music by one person who, at the same time, it is completely synthetic while being completely organic. And I respect the hell out of that. And it is someone who is driven completely by pure artistic vision and just having a creative outlet. It is odd. It's a very odd album, but that's kind of what I like about it. It has elements and moments that don't always mesh and give you a chance to really get comfortable, and I appreciate that. And I just appreciate that someone is willing to do something like this and go there, and I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, those are our thoughts on the one, the only, the Vektroid. Now we get to the main event of the evening, to our haiku reviews. Play record break. Play the record breakers, the poetry game. We get to our haiku reviews. Yeah. Drew, what is your haiku?
Hypnagogic love, just the right amount of dance. Riding vapor waves.
Bryce, what is your haiku?
The opposite of Mac Plus on another day. Dope cinematics.
My haiku. Vaporwave goodness with great explorative sound. Hot pink neon skulls. David, what is your haiku?
This is a hot mess. Exactly what I want in my car at nighttime.
Yeah. Those are our thoughts on Vektroid's Vektroid synthesis.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. Feed and synthetic earth.
I've been hitting the bottle hard. The water.
Pedialyte.
Yes. Seed and Synthetic Earth. You can, of course, find it on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game. Do your due diligence and your due diligence, as it were. Do your homework. Follow along. Listen to the album before you listen to the episode. It's fun. Get to figure out if you hate us or not. You probably do hate us, but, you know.
I'm sorry, Shy Wow. I don't hate you.
Yeah. But that is that. On that Spotify playlist will be next week's album, and that will be provided by Drew. Drew, what do you got for us next week?
Well, when I go into certain genres, there are certain bands that I just think of when I think of that genre. And when I think of Psychobilly, I think of two bands, and that's the Reverend Horton Heat and Tiger Army. So I'm going to hit some Tiger Army with a V. ...
Nice. Look forward to that. It's going to be some fun times. But that is next week, and this is this week. And you can, of course, find us all over the internet. David is at Call Me DJ M. Drew is at XDruciferX. Bryce is at Brycast at BRYCAS or at trendinglemon.com. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com if you want to email us your feedback and hate mail. Rebelli.net for this and other shows. Rebelli TV on YouTube and the like. Do all the things. Like, share, subscribe. Find us where you find podcasts everywhere. Engage. Follow the conversation. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Oodle toot.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.